Of this news earlier today that actor Alec Baldwin will be charged for that deadly shooting on the set of his movie Rust. Now, sadly, this is nowhere near the first time somebody has lost their life on a movie set here in the U.S. Since 1990, it's happened at least 43 times. And on top of that, more than 150 people have suffered life-altering injuries while filming. But far more rare are the circumstances we're talking about right now, with charges as serious as involuntary manslaughter. The nature of that crime varies from state to state, although our investigative reporter Kristen Thorne sat down with defense attorney and legal expert David Schwartz earlier today to better understand exactly what we're talking about with the magnitude of the charges.
First, I want to get your reaction to this charge today, the news of this charge.
Well, I'm not entirely surprised. The charge is really a fact-based charge, and there was a long investigation. And I think the prosecutors could have gone either way. They could have not charged Alec Baldwin, but they also had enough negligence in this case, and that's the standard, is a negligence standard where they created a high enough bar to bring criminal charges.
Let's explain to people what involuntary manslaughter is. I'm familiar with that because of what I do. You're familiar with that. What does that mean?
Sure. You know, in New York, it's different than New Mexico. So in New Mexico, the theory is where there's a lawful activity going on at that time, but there was negligence involved with the activity, meaning that a reasonable person would not have acted the way Alec Baldwin did. A reasonable person would have taken other precautions before firing the weapon. So, you know, so it's a different standard. So it's that reasonable person standard. And the fact that he was handling a gun involves an enhancement. So the enhancement brings it up to a potential of 5 years in jail. The regular involuntary manslaughter charge is 1.5 years. Speaking
of jail, prison time, do you think he's going to do any?
I don't think so. If he does do jail time, it'll be minimal jail time. Either this case is going to have a disposition where there's a plea bargain and Alec Baldwin will have to plead guilty to a crime, and then that would involve probably little to no jail, or he's going to go to trial and face a maximum of 5 years in jail. We'll see what happens. If he goes to trial, it'll be one of those blockbuster trials, that's for sure, but there's a good chance that this case could settle before that point.
His attorney called this a, quote, terrible miscarriage of justice. What do you think?
If I were his attorney, I would say the same exact thing. I think Alec Baldwin has a lot of arguments. I think Alec Baldwin has the argument that this is just a horrible, horrible accident that took place, but there was no negligence on his part. And if there was no negligence on his part, why should he be charged? He's claiming that he had no idea and would have no idea that there could be live ammunition in that gun, as opposed to the prosecutors are saying, wait a second, you should have known that this was a dangerous situation. There was a danger involved in this whole episode. There was negligence throughout. There was cutting of corners. And they feel they have enough evidence to show that Alec Baldwin was negligent. So his attorney is going to argue, look, this is a civil case, not a criminal case. And the civil case was already, you know, the civil case has had a disposition already.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? One thing that's bothered me, I don't know if it's bothered you, is how did that bullet end up in that gun in the first place? Doesn't that seem to be kind of really an issue here?
It's a huge issue, and the prosecutors need to explain that issue, because you would think if they had a person that actually put the live round in that gun, well, aren't we talking a little bit more about voluntary manslaughter and maybe even murder? Aren't we talking about that? If somebody takes a gun that's going to be used on a set and instead of putting blanks in, knowingly puts in live ammunition, I think we're more on the murder realm. So it leads me to believe that they don't have that the prosecutors have not figured out how that live rounds got into that gun.
And if it goes to trial, I don't think it will either, but if it does, that will obviously be a huge discussion.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're the defense attorney, you're just saying, You know, where's the proof? Like, who put this live bullet in this gun? Certainly Alec Baldwin did not, because he's not being charged with that. So, you know, I think the prosecutors have a lot of barriers to overcome in this case. I think the defense does have a viable case, but so does the prosecution. It's one of those close calls, which makes this case a very interesting case, and it's very fact-specific, and it could be based on many different nuances that we don't know about right now.
Yeah, because if it goes to trial, that is not going to be a good look for law enforcement and prosecutors here, that they have not been able to pinpoint who did that, because the really lucky person here is whoever put that bullet in that gun. It didn't do it by itself. It didn't walk into the chamber and into the gun. Someone did it. And I am still very curious and think that person needs to be held accountable as well.
Kristen, that sounded like an opening statement right there. 100%. 100%. That is what the defense is going to argue. But we don't know what's happening right now, right? Is the investigation over? Who knows, Kristen? We may see somebody charged with putting that bullet in the chamber. So we don't know what's about to come next. But I'm led to believe, at least by these charges today, that they don't have that person. And they're going strictly on a negligence standard as it goes to Alec Baldwin, what he should have known. Did he act like a reasonable person? Did he exercise the reasonable amount of care that he should have in that situation when handling a gun?
If you were his attorney right now, or maybe you can give us some insight, what are they talking about right now?
Well, first they're talking about shutting him up. Okay, he can't do any more interviews. He can't go out in the press. He needs to stop talking, because everything he says could be used against him at this point and before this point. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they're trying to get as much information from him as possible, but I'm sure they have their own team of investigators right now who are conducting their own interviews, their own analysis, and their own investigation. So their own investigation could come up big in this case as well.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you'll stay in touch with us. We know that this is, the charges are formally, are going to be announced later this month. And so we know that this will still be going on. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Kristen.
Coming up next on the Eyewitness News Countdown, a discussion about what is on the line when it comes to raising the federal debt limit in the United States. Welcome back to the Eyewitness News Countdown. The U.S. has now hit its debt ceiling, and that means the clock is now ticking on Congress to prevent a financial meltdown.